Good evening, everyone. We are here for a special edition of Clubhouse Picks, episode 6, I believe. Maybe it's episode 7. I think it's episode 7 of Clubhouse Picks. We're here talking Masters live reaction. Jon Rahm has an amazing Sunday and seals the deal after Brooks Koepka failed to keep up with him. The weather cleared up. We had a lot of good golf. A lot of guys moved up. Phil Mickelson finished tied for second with the clubhouse lead until the other two guys finished. Victor Hovland was around the leaderboard, some sort of weird names as well. Guys, at least we didn't expect. And some guys we did, like Cam Young. And if you go through episode 6, you'll see those as well from our Masters preview. So, Nate, just general, before we talk about Jon Rahm, just give me your general reaction. If you were running a newspaper right now, like a sports newspaper, what would your headline be tomorrow?
I mean, just Rahm wins with just excellence across the board. I mean, that's what it was. I mean, he was just dominant. Brooks was really good. I mean, I think that the real headline, it's not pithy, but the real headline is like the LIV guys played their butts off in this thing in a way that none of us expected. We didn't give them a ton of credit on the preview show because we just didn't know what to expect, because neither of it's just such an old school way to handicap the LIV guys by just watching them play their shotgun start and being oh, hit the irons pretty well, wherever they're playing. But other than that, we just don't have a ton of data to go off of. So it's really hard to tell sort of how competitive these guys have been playing each other. And it's clear now that they're pretty damn competitive. And I know that I learned a lot just from in terms of just handicapping these events moving forward. Don't write off the LIV guys just because we don't have stats. Maybe I actually do need to watch some of these lead up tournaments to the majors for the LIV, just kind of get an idea, because it's clear that you can't just write them off anymore.
So LIV guys, we're talking their success, and we'll start there, then we can circle back to Rahm. Koepka finishes tied for second, 8 under. Mickelson tied for second, 8 under with a 7 under today, which is just, we'll get to that.
65,
that's just ridiculous. Patrick Reed, 7 under, so tied for 4th. I believe that's the big ones. Does Woodland play on the LIV Tour?
No, Woodland. No, we don't get any other guys until Neiman. It's tied for 16th at 2.
Yeah. But that's a lot of guys at the top of the leaderboard who finished top 5. And, Patrick Reed is someone who was probably 90-1, if not more than that. We talked about Brooks Koepka on the show. Koepka started at 99-1. He won a tournament 75-1, hammered down to 35-1. And even at 35-1, we kind of demurred and we're I don't know. Injuries, hasn't won a major in a while. And it looked like he was going to win that tournament. So we can't count these LIV guys out, it seems like, which means we got to watch more LIV golf and we have to respect their game. And it's not that these are some of the best golfers in the world. That's why they play on the LIV Tour. But at the same time, they don't play a lot of golf anymore. So you just figure,
right.
And the other thing is, like you're saying, the statistics are really hard to read because they're just old school statistics. So we're used to talking about strokes gained, and now we got to talk about, driving distance or whatever,
right.
And stuff like that. So that makes it very difficult. But as far as the LIV guys go, is Brooks Koepka the top story, or Phil? Who's the top story for the LIV guys?
I mean, I think it's got to be Phil, right? I mean, Phil comes in. He hadn't been playing well on the LIV. He's 52 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, he's won 3 green jackets, and we see, some older guys play well there. Freddie Couples played well there throughout his sort of early senior years. Never finished like this. I mean, this is the oldest player to finish in the top 5 in Masters history. He just beat out Jimmy Demerit, who set that record in the 60s. So, in terms of that, that's pretty crazy. And I think that the leap that Phil made is you expect Brooks, Brooks was healthy. Brooks said he was healthy in press conferences leading up to it. Brooks won last week. I think that, it's a huge story. It would have been a bigger story if Brooks had won, because then it's that's a huge coup for LIV. But in terms of, just massive story now that Brooks hasn't won and Brooks finished second again at the Masters, like he did in 2019 to Tiger, I think that it's got to be Phil. I mean, this is just crazy. Like the level of game that he brought to Augusta was just nuts. And, Phil's always like, oh, I'm really close. I'm putting stuff together. He always says that in press conferences. And then he like shoots like 75. And he's like, I don't know, I'm hitting the ball really well. Like hot rounds coming. And he kept saying that. And I kept on thinking like classical Phil, like BS. And then he like did it. It was ridiculous. He kept saying like, I'm just waiting. Like I'm going to have a good round. And he showed it today. I mean, he shot 65 on Sunday at Augusta, which is crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And he hung around long enough to be able to do that. He really, other than that, incredible round at 52, really just an incredible story. He hasn't missed a cut on the LIV Tour this year. So it's not like,
well, they don't have a cut on the LIV Tour.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. So there you go. Can't miss a cut if there's no cut.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, playing okay, but not winning tournaments on the LIV Tour. Then you have Brooks, who has been playing well and been playing really well on the LIV Tour. And when he's healthy, is probably one of the best golfers, especially in a major, that we've ever seen. However, today he really couldn't find his putter. I don't know what his strokes gained were. Putting, I don't really know I don't have his statistics up, but just from a viewer's standpoint, he missed a lot of putts that on Saturday he was making, or especially on Friday before the weather.
For Brooks today, it was just kind of everything was mediocre. He was 29th in strokes gained putting, which isn't good. But he pretty much, but he still was like basically field average. The thing that just killed him today was he was not good around the greens. Around the greens, he was just awful. And it really just tanked his sort of tee to green numbers, just because he threw away basically 2 strokes today around the greens. And that's what killed him, was the short game stuff. On TV, they were like off the tee, it was wayward drives, but those didn't really cost him a ton of strokes. I mean, he was basically field average there too. It was just, it was the chipping short game stuff that really got him.
Yeah, that's you could see that when he just looked wobbly a little bit today. And it's very, very surprising for a guy who is the best closer probably in golf. If he's got a lead on Sunday in a major, you expect him to finish, and he shot a really poor round. And when you allow Rahm that much space, he's going to attack, and he's going to pick up strokes and win a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what it was. I mean, that was the only really weak part of Brooks' game, was just around the greens all week. I mean, that's the whole story. I mean, he was second in strokes gained approach, he was 4th in putting, 9th tee to green. It was just that 44th around the green that just buried him. Wow. Basically almost like worse amongst players that made the cut, right down there. So that's really what hurt him. But it was strange to see. I mean, you're not used to seeing Brooks look kind of flustered and frustrated out there on a Sunday at a major when he's leading, and he definitely did. And this is the second time that he's done that at Augusta, where he's kind of faltered with the lead.
Augusta can do that to you. I mean, we see it all the time. It's one of those courses.
And
we were
talking about this before.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, right? Where it's like they set it up so that it's really hard for leaders to hold a lead, but it's really easy if you want to chase to really press, because there's always going to be, if the conditions are normal, there's always going to be a 65 out there for somebody. We see this every year. We saw it last year with Rory and Colin playing really well, and Rory shot a 65 last year, 64 last year. We saw Phil shoot a 65 today. Like, the numbers were out there. It's just hard,
It is. And it's really hard to put together those types of numbers every day. And then, of course, the weather. So they had to finish the 3rd round today. And you don't know, even with his health, I'm not sure I want to bet on Brooks playing 26 holes in a day. It's a lot for that knee to take. We saw, Tiger, the stress of the weather seemed to flare up his plantar fasciitis. So, a lot of that has to do with just not being able to get in rhythm, get a routine. So you have to be just such a dog in that mentality of like, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to prove it today. And Jon Rahm did that. Now, another question I want to ask you, and we talk about this all the time, but it bears repeating. We've talked about it with Scotty. We've talked about it with Rory. Jon Rahm wins the Masters, another major championship for him. He won his first one in 2020, I believe. He's one of the top golfers, if not the top golfer in the world. What makes Jon Rahm so special? Is it the mental stuff? Like, is it the mentality, or is he just tee to green and on the greens the best putter in the world right now, or the best golfer in the world right now?
I think it's just like a well-rounded skill set. I mean, we saw the warts for Scotty and Rory this week, in a way that, you know, like, we're kind of predictable. People have been sort of like worried about Scotty Scheffler's putting for weeks now. I've seen a few think pieces on PGA Tour where they're kind of deep diving into stats, like what's the weak part of blah blah blah's game. And Scotty's, it was putting, and it just reared its head this week at Augusta, like in a way that I think was shocking, probably even for him. I mean, the amount of missed putts. I mean, he was 50th in strokes gained putting, so he's basically like last among guys that made the cut, which is horrible. And you know, Rory's stuff was just, it just is what it is. You know, I mean, he just didn't look comfortable out there ever. And I think for Rory, you know, it was just pressure this week. And Rahm's just so well-rounded. I mean, the worst part of his game this week was his putting, and even that was like still pretty good. So, you know, and everything else, I think the thing that stands out the most to me with Rahm is that there's no real like glaring weaknesses. Sometimes the putter can go a little sideways on him, but he's just such a consistent ball striker, and it just looks like he's never going to miss with like that compact swing. I think it's like what just gets me is he's like so good off the tee, and the iron game when it's clicking, he just makes it look so easy hitting those cuts and everything.
Can you talk more about the compact swing? I mean, you play a lot of golf. What we always hear when we play golf, you know, swing down on the ball, get more compact as you come off your backswing and into the golf ball. But like, what do you mean when you say Rahm's compact swing?
Yeah, well, it's just he like the way that he sort of like flexes his wrist in the backswing to sort of get like that big angle. He just basically presets it like almost like midway through his backswing to like for impact. So there's just like so few things that can go wrong because he just gets into like, it's a really unique position for a player to be in their backswing, and it's a really unique golf swing because it's so short. But it just looks like when he's really like grooved, there's just nothing that can go wrong. There's no like loose like sort of legs that, you know, we'd see even with Tiger in his prime, like where the hips would kind of outrun his like upper body and he hit block or snap hook. You see it with Rory sometimes where he just hits like a big flare out to the right. With Rahm, it just never looks like that. It just always looks like he's just going to hit just a bullet fade down the middle of the fairway every time when he's locked in. There's just no like weird moving parts. He just has a uniquely efficient golf swing that's just built for just someone like Jon Rahm.
Yeah. And when you combine that with his size, because he's huge.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't need to have a huge long swing.
No, he doesn't, because he can put so much power into it. But you see guys sometimes who have a much bigger swing, a less compact swing. You know, Hideki Matsuyama is big, and at times his swing looks not so compact. I mean, he has a weird swing because his
pause at the top.
He pauses, but he really rips through. And so some of the other guys, Rahm is so compact. In the closer he gets, when he gets around the green, it becomes even shorter and more compact, and he just doesn't miss. He doesn't miss around the green. That's what's so crazy about him. Even at Augusta, where it's so easy to just hit a good shot right around the green, and then the ball rolls somewhere where you didn't want it to. And, you know, guys like Hovland, they play that really well as well. Morikawa usually is pretty good at it, sort of reading the greens, hitting it at the right spot, but there's nobody better than Rahm. Every time you look up, Jon Rahm just hit onto the green, and it's 2 feet from the hole. And then if he's feeling the flat stick, I mean, he just, you know, he'll sink putts, and he'll sink them from 5, 6, 7 feet. And we see that. I mean, that's my favorite thing about Patrick Reed's game, of course, is his hands are so steady. And I really thought, to be honest with you, I thought Patrick Reed might challenge the leaderboard today, just because early on his putting looked incredible. And I thought, oh, well, here we go. If Patrick Reed can gain like 3 strokes putting, if he's, you know, really, really putting well, but didn't seem to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess we just like sort of like sold Rahm short a little bit. I mean, like, this makes sense. He's finished in the top 10 4 times at Augusta, and we just like weren't giving him any credit because like they were all, it seemed kind of like quiet finishes, you know, sneaking in top 7, top 8. It never seemed like he's ever really been like in the hunt for a Masters, but the results are there. I mean, the history's there. It's shocking to me that he's played 6 times at Augusta. It doesn't seem like he's been out on tour for that long.
Yeah. And when you when you're Jon Rahm and you finish 7th, it's like a disappointment. So some guy who we're looking at who's 50-1 and 2 years ago they finished 8th at the Masters, you're like, oh, okay. But Jon Rahm, you overlook him. But we did overlook him. We didn't talk about him at all. On Tuesday, we talked about Scotty Scheffler, who had an okay. I mean, I think he's finished in the top 20 easy. He had a pretty good round today, but we talked about him. We talked a little bit about Rory. We didn't talk about Rahm at all. So, that's how Rahm's game is. Sometimes he can be kind of quiet that way. So another thing I want to talk about, we talked about this a little bit. Brooks Koepka falls apart. Did you see anything in his game other than, we pretty much talked about the around the green stuff for him. So we can kind of move on. He was someone who I'm pretty shocked was fell apart at the end there. But we kind of talked about that. So let's move on to Phil. Do you think Phil can win another major at 52 years old? The PGA, the Open, like can he do it, or is this just because he's so good at Augusta? Is this the height of what he can accomplish?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, nobody thought he could win a PGA, a couple years ago. I mean, I mean, are there going to be people that are lining up to bet him to win the U.S. Open and complete the career Grand Slam? Probably. Are they wasting their money? Probably. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, he's 150-1 to win the PGA. So clearly, I'm looking at the odds right now. He's 150-1 to the PGA Championship, the next major. So, obviously the sports books aren't giving him a ton of love, but I think it's probably an Augusta thing. I think it'll probably be like the Freddie Couples type story where he always just can kind of move it around Augusta. He knows kind of how to manipulate the golf course. He putts pretty well there. Typically he putted really well this week. But to expect Phil to just be like competing in like every major at his age, even on a sort of reduced schedule like LIV, I just can't see it. I really can't. I mean, this felt like more of an outlier, and it was an outlier. He hasn't played well in LIV. He just said like, oh, I got, some help with my driving from one of my LIV teammates or whatever. And he putted the absolute eyes out of the ball. Putting tends to not be a very predictive stat. So I wouldn't put like too much weight in like Phil just catching like a hot putter this week.
What would have happened if he had won?
Oh my God. Golf Twitter would have melted down. I mean, that would have been like just first, like, I mean, golf Twitter, golf media, like everything would have melted down. I mean, because he's been the face of LIV and he's been like the evil sort of like person with LIV. He's been unrepentant about taking the money. He's been unrepentant about what it is. He's never said a negative thing. A lot of the guys have walked back. Harold Varner walked back this week kind of on Washington Post, and it's sort of like, like I just did it to take the money. I don't think that anyone actually believes we're growing the game. Even Brooks kind of walked it back when they were like, if you weren't injured, do you think you would have gone to LIV? And he was like, probably not. I don't know. Like maybe, probably not. And Phil's been the only one that's just like die hard. Like he will go down with the ship. Like him and Greg Norman are just like the diehards for it. So I think it would have been really weird, and it would have been really awkward for the PGA Tour too. I mean, because then it's like, great.
Not only does a LIV guy win, but like Mr. LIV wins, and it's the greatest story because it's like the oldest guy to win a major. So
again, like he breaks his own record as the oldest major winner.
So it's just it's too much. It's too much.
I mean, it would have broken my brain, and we're Civil War buffs, and I'm reading the Civil War right now, and it's like the end of the Civil War, and I keep thinking about like everyone's always talking about like maybe like trying to like make a peace treaty. And I think that like if Phil wins like a major, if he had won the Masters, I think that really brings the PGA Tour and LIV to like the negotiating table, to like try and like end this and figure out a way they both coexist.
Yeah, it would have to. I think it would have to. But he didn't win. He finished second, and so did Brooks. So some LIV guys up at the top. Patrick Reed, of course, we talked about that. So some guys up there. Can't count them out. You might be able to count Phil out. It's hard to say, but hopefully he can complete the Grand Slam. We've all been waiting for that. And if he did it, it'd be, of course, one of the greatest stories.
It would just
that and Tiger winning it would be. Yeah, it would be. But Phil's a ludicrous person. So if anyone can can
if anyone
do the
can do
ludicrous
it, I
thing.
mean, nobody thought he could do it when he won at 51 years old, a couple of years ago. I mean, who the hell knows with him? I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of an Augusta thing, though. He plays so well at Augusta. He putts way better than he does anywhere else. He's so comfortable on that course. He's had so much success. We see a lot with Tiger. I mean, Tiger's probably in the twilight of his career, and he still plays super well. Like you said, Couples as well. Some of those guys, they just know Augusta. They are comfortable there, and they can move. And Phil is so savvy because, like you said, a 65 was out there. Phil knew that, and he went and got it.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And he knew exactly how to attack it.
Yeah. And that's a veteran golfer on a veteran course. That's just what that is. So really happy to see that from Phil. I was happy to see it from Brooks. I like Brooks. A lot of people don't. I don't understand why. He's a great golfer. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's, kind of a pain in.
He really
in those
humanized
interviews.
himself this week. I mean, he was really thoughtful in the interviews in a way that I'd never really seen him that thoughtful prior to the sort of Netflix thing coming out and him jumping to LIV. So that was weird for me.
The Netflix thing really caught him at rock bottom too, that full swing, because he was he was injured. He couldn't make a cut. He was very frustrated. So that humanized him too, but you could also see that he was losing. He was being humbled in a way that he hadn't before. And, him and Bryson kind of came up in that same way. Mr. Par 67, who missed the cut, was 4 over, so. Then they had that swagger, and that was also when the PGA was trying to entice everyone to maximize engagement on Twitter and social media. So some of that has to do with that. LIV on the LIV Tour, they don't have to do that. So they complained a lot about that a couple years ago about, you just have to say stuff on Twitter to get engagement so you could make more money.
Right,
So,
and he just sort of leaned into being the heel, so to speak, to use like a wrestling term.
But he's a good heel. I mean, he really is.
Great one, yeah.
He's also an incredible golfer. So, okay. So we had a lot of fun this week. Who do you think out there just this week today, who do you think had the most fun? Who do you think had the least fun as far as golfers go?
I mean, Sahith seemed to be having a ball today, shooting 67.
He really did.
I mean, he was phenomenal. And we were talking about that, right? Like, because when you sent me this originally, you were like, who's having the most fun and why is it Sahith Theegala? Yeah. He did exactly what we kind of talked about him a little bit in the preview show, right? Like short game master, strokes gained off the tee doesn't really hurt him that much. And today he did exactly sort of like what we thought was a success. He was 29th in strokes gained off the tee en route to 67, and he was 4th in putting, 2nd around the green, 8th in approach. He was just ridiculous. He chipped in. So I mean, the guy's got to be feeling good about this. We sort of suspected that this might be a course where he was comfortable, and he really looked like it today. So in terms of guys who was having the most fun, I think it had to have been him. Guys that were having. What's that?
Real quick for Sahith, that dude's going to win a major pretty soon, I think. I don't know if it's going to be immediately. He's definitely going to start winning golf tournaments. Being comfortable like that out there on a Sunday at the Masters, when you kind of know you're not going to win, but you also are moving up the leaderboard and they're going to cash a pretty big paycheck, to be having that much fun, to chip in that, the chip at 16, I believe. He said someone yelled, chip it in for Tiger. And then he did. So, I mean, sick, and you don't hear that at the Masters. Everybody's it's not the Ryder Cup. People aren't hollering at guys. So I think he brings that out in golf fans as well, because he has so much fun, a lot like Tom Kim, who we all love because he's so gregarious on the course. He's not very serious. He's always smiling. So, a lot of young talent that's really exciting, but he seemed to be having a ton of fun today. Anyone who was having the least amount of fun, I got one. I wonder if it's the same person.
I mean, I think there's two. I think just who's having the least amount of fun probably had to be like Jason Day en route to shooting 80. Nothing worked.
Yeah. For a guy who was playing so well.
Yeah, I mean, he was 3 under. I mean, if he just posts, a 70 or whatever, which was gettable on this golf course, he's like in the top 10. He's tied with Sahith at in the top 10. So from that perspective, like, I'm sure Jason Day's got to be frustrated. Like, it's right there for him. He'd been playing great all tournament, and then just to go out and just lay an egg. And the obvious one is obviously Brooks, right? I mean, he just never could get it going today. At all.
Yeah, so. He couldn't. Another guy who was just miserable out there, and I don't know why, was Sam Bennett, the amateur who was right there and then had a difficult day. But it's not like he shot 80 like Jason Day. I mean, I don't know what he shot, but I bet it was pretty close to par.
He shot 74. He shot 74.
Yeah, 2 over. But especially late, every time he swung the club, it was like Tyrrell out there, just frowning and cussing at himself. And he would miss a putt, like a putt that wasn't easy to hit, be cussing at himself. So he didn't seem to be having a lot of fun, but we should see a lot from him in the future. I don't think so. If you finish in the top 15 or something, the top 12, I believe, then you get an automatic invite next year.
Right.
So I think he's a little outside that. Maybe that's why he was frustrated. He felt like he was going to punch his ticket to a Masters next year.
I think that probably was heavily on his mind. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been on mine. I knew that was going to happen to him. It's just
I think it's also the frustration of at one point he was third, he was 8 under at one point. And I think he's thinking, if I could have just held it together for, 36 holes, I could have been tied for second, and that would have been awesome. If I just play okay, he's having a conversation about slipping on a green jacket as an amateur. And I think that he's just disappointed in himself that he just kind of, frittered so much of it away. He shoots basically 76, 74 on the weekend.
Yeah, but one of the reasons he was third was because the weather was horrible those first couple of days, and he was able to. He shot he played some incredible golf in that storm on yesterday. Even he has great ball striking ability, and he was able to putt pretty well down there. He's not long enough off the tee. These guys who can really move on a Sunday, they're experienced enough to recognize that the course is giving birdies and go and get them. And Sam Bennett was not able to do that, mostly because he's young and he's an amateur.
Yeah.
And I just don't think he would have been third if the weather wasn't crap on Friday and Saturday. I mean, he played great 2.5 rounds of golf, but if we had better weather, these guys would have moved up on Saturday. They would have moved up on Friday. And I think he would have been a nice story, but probably in the top 15, top 20, not third. But you never know. I mean, we are going to hear his name a little bit more. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's playing a college tournament tomorrow, which is kind of funny. In Texas A&M.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably fade Sam Bennett into that tournament. I'm sure he's got.
I don't even know if they take lines on that one.
I don't think they do.
Maybe.
I think maybe just let him rest for a day. You're the coach.
Yeah, for real. So last thing we want to talk about, we talked about this a little bit, was the weather. How do you think the weather affected? Let's talk about this first, because I know this has been on your mind. How has the weather affected your viewing experience for this Masters?
God. Oh, okay. All right. Wind me up for that. It was horrible. It was horrible because in the past, ESPN has done this thing where they've done basically you could watch any group. That was the first couple of years they had this contract. You could just click on any group and watch any player. Obviously, I had a bet on Colin Morikawa. Obviously, he was kind of close to maybe working his way really into the conversation of being in contention at certain points on Friday and Saturday. And all I wanted to do was watch Colin, and then it was CBS coverage didn't start until basically the leaders were on the back nine yesterday. So we're watching watching featured group, and then I switched over to hole 4, 5, and 6 on ESPN Plus to see if I can catch a couple Colin holes. Then it's back to featured group. Then we go to Amen Corner 10, 11, 12, watch them again. And then it's featured group, and then it's 15, 16, watch them again. And it was just horrible, just bouncing around. I'm just checking my phone constantly. It was the worst viewing experience, just in terms of being able to follow a guy that you want to follow, or just sort of follow anyone that's in contention. I mean, because even the leaders, there were just huge gaps where you couldn't see what they were doing on the front nine. You just see them on 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
You never saw them on 1, 2, 3, and you never saw them on 7, 8, 9.
I didn't watch
the coverage didn't even start for them until they basically got to 10.
I didn't watch holes 1, 2, 3 at all this weekend. And then as soon as the back nine starts for the leaders, they call it because of weather.
Yeah,
so
and then
we
16 minutes into
day.
coverage on Saturday. We go all day. I'm patchworking this thing where I'm trying to get a good viewing experience, the leaders, guys that are in contention. And then it finally goes to CBS. Boom, pull the plug.
Yeah.
And they were right
Unreal.
to pull the plug. I mean, it was flooding. I mean, it was bad.
Yeah. They shouldn't have been out there playing.
But it was a tough week for TV, just because CBS seemed reluctant to expand their coverage. Obviously they have all their like little pieces on, like what it was like for Jack Nicklaus to win the Masters in 1986 and, blah, 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 like we have every year. And they like won't let those go to have more coverage, which is what we as golf fans would like. Pretty familiar with Jack's story at this point. So
yeah, we've all seen the putt.
Yeah, we've all seen it, and we've seen the yellow shirt and the pants. Yeah, we know what's going to happen. So I would have liked more golf. And that was like my criticism for ESPN too, right? It was like, all right, like let's see what Ryan Fitzpatrick has to say about the fan experience at the Masters after we watched Jon Rahm hit a tee shot on 8, and then it's like 5 minutes of Ryan Fitzpatrick talking about eating a sandwich.
Yeah, that was the ESPN coverage has been like that now for a while at the Masters. And so I don't even really tune into ESPN until maybe the featured groups get to like 10 or 11, because I'll just do the ESPN Plus. Okay, 4, 5, 6, Amen Corner, 15, 16, whatever. But it used to be, and ESPN Plus has been like at the Players, ESPN Plus had tons of groups. You could watch all sorts of people golf. And it was great because I'm a fan of some of these golfers who aren't really in featured groups. They're not in contention, but I still want to see them golf. I still like to watch them swing a club. I want to know if I can handicap them next week. Maybe their swing looked better than it did before. Maybe they've been putting really well. I can't know that without being able to watch them golf, other than just looking at the stats. And the stats lie a lot. You have to be watching these tournaments. So I don't know, kind of frustrating. And then the weather thing was crazy because the minute you get to the featured groups, they call it, and they should have called it, but it's like, okay, why didn't we figure this out and just air? Why didn't CBS just start airing it earlier?
Right.
They don't want to
just
let
move the
go
schedule.
of their coverage. Yeah.
Right. Like we had to have like Good Morning America instead of like, just golf, even though it's the Masters, and they pay a ton of money for that. Yeah.
Price is Right at noon instead of just watching, good golfers at the Masters. So that was a little frustrating. Anything else about the weather? Do you feel like it affected? Ultimately Jon Rahm was one of the favorites and he won, so it didn't affect it too much.
Yeah. Rahm, I think Rahm kind of benefited a little bit from the draw, and he benefited quite a bit from the fact that like whenever it got really, really bad, he just sort of survived. I think Brooks really benefited from the draw. And he admitted as much. Rahm really kind of had to gut it up through some pretty bad weather. But
yeah, because Brooks had a good draw on Thursday. And I think on Friday too, he was out there kind of early.
The late early draw. He got the late Thursday, early Friday. So he got out before all the weather was bad and just posted his number and went home. So Brooks definitely benefited from a good draw. Rahm just kind of gutted it up, to be quite honest, and just sort of powered through it. I think the biggest benefit that some of these guys got is that like by the time the weather got like really, really bad, we watched the Open Championship or the US Open. Sometimes they'll like let it go for like a little bit too long because they're sort of like sadists in that way. And they'll let them go out there and just shoot a million. Augusta National just pulled the plug, which I think kind of kept the competitive balance a little bit more intact. Just by not forcing those guys to like play in basically like a mud pit. Yeah.
And, we talked about the irrigation system at Augusta. The drainage is pretty good there, but it is the South. So the water table is a little bit higher and it just floods quicker. It just starts to pool in the South in ways that it just doesn't up north in some of the other golf tournaments.
Today it looks great again, but yesterday it was bad. Was bad.
And I was glad the weather held out because you don't want to be watching the Masters on Monday, like a Monday night being like, oh, Jon Rahm won while you're trying to, get to work, get through the week or whatever. So that was really good. Any last thoughts here? Any thoughts on Tiger? He had to withdraw today because of plantar fasciitis. He made the cut. Any thoughts to that? Is Tiger someone we should probably count out for the rest of the year?
I really don't know. There's a part of me that thinks the US Open in LA would be like a really huge story for someone like Tiger, Southern California guy, going back and, maybe being competitive there. It's kind of a classic golf course. But I don't know. I mean, he just doesn't look the same. I think that the PGA and the US Open are probably his best shots because they'll probably be a little bit warmer. And he seems to really like struggle when it's colder, but I don't know. I mean, he's 200 to 1 in the PGA like right now. So
yeah,
nobody's giving him much of a chance.
I like that 150 to 1 on Phil. Who knows?
Yeah.
Did it last year? 150 to 1, a couple bucks, you know?
Yeah.
I've
and
done worse with my money.
The initial odds are like sort of intriguing for other guys. I mean, you have basically Spieth, Hovland, Burns, Dustin Johnson, Cam Smith, and Homa all at 30 to 1 for the PGA. Because everything's so like front heavy on Rahm, Scheffler, McIlroy. So that's kind of interesting. But in terms of Phil and Tiger, I don't know. I think that our days of watching them really be ultra competitive without really just sort of like a crazy outlier performance are probably over.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Well, listen, it was an incredible Masters as always. It was a lot of fun. Really interesting to see some of these LIV guys compete in ways that I don't think a lot of us thought they would. And then, of course, to see Jon Rahm, who is with Scotty Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, but especially Scotty, the best golfer in the world. Scotty wins the Players. Rahm wins the Masters. These guys are favorites for a reason. They are the best golfers to do this in the sport, and they're absolute stone cold killers on Sunday. If they're playing well, they're going to close, and you have to play your best golf if you want to fend them off. And Brooks couldn't do that today. So I want to thank Nate Perry, my co-host on Clubhouse Picks, for joining us for a very short podcast about the Masters reaction. We'll have this up on Spotify and YouTube soon. You can get this on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to rate and review, really helps us. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts on the Masters, and we will see you on Tuesday for our preview of the upcoming tournament, which has slipped my mind for the second time. Nate, what's that tournament?
RBC Heritage at Hilton.
The RBC Heritage. That's right. Okay. We'll see you Tuesday for that. Happy golfing, everyone.